I really just wanted to see
But
if the stress would fit.
like, on average, every year, 30 kids.
Nice job.
At least,
That adds up.
every year.
Okay, good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, January 30th, and we're here for a special workshop for goal setting. It was requested by council in a previous meeting that we convene at a time and a place where we could be a little more casual and discuss the city goals and have that discussion. So we're here, that's what we're here to do. It's going to be very informal. So informal that I'm going to throw to whomever would like to start this conversation about goal setting.
Madam Mayor, I respectfully suggest, since there are people in the audience, maybe they would like to have some comments before we get started.
It's not a bad idea.
Sure, we can do that. Does everyone agree?
I agree.
Okay. Then I will say that, thank you for joining us this evening, by the way. And if you would like to make any type of public comment, or you have any ideas that you would like to offer up for what we are going to be discussing tonight, please make your way to the podium. We'll allot you 3 minutes. We'll stick to the normal rules. We ask your name, you give us your name and your address. So if anyone would like to do that, we welcome you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Adam Wolf. I live at 109 Elmsford. I've spoken to many of you in the past and communicate with some of you through email. Thank you to our city manager, Councilman Binkowski, and Mayor Pro Tem Moffitt for recently responding to my most recent communications. I'm going to be straight and say that a lot of the residents on Elmsford right now are pretty upset, and we're kind of frustrated at the lack of progress in any forward action concerning the sewer situation. I've heard a lot of information. I've heard that last year, that at the end of the year, engineers were studying it, even though a month or two before that, after the actual flooding, I was told by DPW that they actually already investigated. I've heard about grants that have come in, a couple grants to help fund the $175 million project for about $1 million. And frankly, 2 grants, even for a city of this size, is not a lot for something like this. I've talked to you last year as well, mentioning that there's the opportunity to hire an interim grant writer. That would be a minimal charge. I've met 2 people now. One I've been told has reached out, and the other one has not yet, but it would be available, that could potentially do this for a couple $100 here or there. They could find way more potential grants, a lot more funding for the city. No effort has been made in that regard. Another element is I talked to several of the council members last year as well after the meeting about working with other cities like Troy to try and find funding. I recently went to a meeting with our state representative who said that her priority this year is Clawson. She had everybody at the meeting was Troy except for me. And she said, our priority this year is to work on Clawson and secure funding for Clawson infrastructure. She told me she reached out to the city multiple times and hasn't been able to get a response. So the point of this being is communication seems to be lacking a lot as far as like intercommunication as well, because between the answers I got from the several of you that have responded, there's been contradictions, there's been different information. I've heard of potential options like backflow valves, which I had one of those. They fail, especially when it's a large amount of water going into a house. They're designed to prevent a small flow of water going back in, not a gigantic flood from the entire sewer line that's too small to compensate for the residents. There's a lot of potential opportunities here. We know our sewers are too small. We know they're corroded out. We know that they're transferring from a smaller line to a bigger line or vice versa. The reality of the situation is, I know this is not an overnight project. The residents know this is not an overnight project, but this has been known since 2014. This has happened again in 2020 and again in 2024. There's been no actual actionable progress. There's been discussions, we've secured a little bit of funding, and there's been talk about taxing. But what else has been done? And it's very frustrating to see that. I can also tell you that while I'm not actively involved, I've talked to many people on my block and another block on the far side of Clawson. Some people have already talked about a class action, and I'm not threatening that at all. I want to be clear on that. But I'm telling you, these have been discussions. I've talked to neighbors who said, if it happens again, I'm leaving. I'm leaving the city. And it wasn't an empty threat. They've already started potentially planning for that incursion. So I just want to be clear, this is a dire, immediate concern issue, should be top priority. And when we're talking on that same issue, and this is my last thing, so I apologize, I don't want to keep taking all the time, but infrastructure is, I understand it's a package deal. I understand we have a lot of roads that are broken down as well. But I gotta say, there's a difference between getting a pothole and having your tire damaged versus $15,000 of your basement getting destroyed. So priorities should be placed on the roads above where those sewer lines need to be replaced, not focusing on all of the roads at once that aren't as much of a priority. So that's what I wanted to be clarified about. Communication needs to improve. I know there's a lot of animosity between the council, the city manager, whatever it might be, but the residents don't care about that. We're here because we want to hear your voices, hear your input, but also we need to get the support from you guys together, and the bickering doesn't help. The situation should be that you're here for the people, you're elected and appointed to serve the city, and the city needs this. So I'd love to see some action going forward along with most of the residents on my street. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak? Hello.
Nate Hara, 413 Park. Happy New Year to everyone. Appreciate Adam West? Wolf. Wolf was West, right? All right, Wolf. All right, super cool. Well, I think you said it very well. And if I spoke as well as you did, I might have been elected. I don't know. I think that I also had the backflow problem before I had backflow valves installed. Most recently, we had pretty heavy rains this past fall, and my backflow valves actually did help me. I have video of it working. They were newly installed, and I was pretty grateful that they did, because a lot of my neighbors, and I looked at a lot of houses on Elmsford, and they definitely had that problem. My feedback is, I guess, less geared towards a demand for spending or, concerns about the planning. I think the financial situation is clear, and the residents spoke clearly that they wanted to prioritize tax money to the schools, which has been done. So that's where 15 mils is going for the next 32 years. I don't know that many Clawson residents can afford another 15 mils to even put a dent in our infrastructure. We'll find out. My recommendation or my request to the city council is to focus on communication. In your goals and discussions, I saw many great things in there, but as it pertains to flooding, I would love to see the city communicate best practices to all of the residents about things that we can do outside of the massive spending to prevent backflows. So things like gutters and downspouts and backflow valves. And I mean, just yesterday, my 1-year-old backup sewer, my backup sump pump, battery operated backup sump pump, I took the liberty to test. So I filled my pit with water, and the battery failed after about 1 gallon was pumped out. It's a 1-year-old battery. Luckily, this was a test. I was shocked that it's on a tender. I thought I have enormous security with my system, but no, it was not. So, and I've talked to people since, and they're like, yeah, that happened to me too on game day when we had bad water, and it was catastrophic for them. So I think if the city had put its heads together and made a comprehensive document that could be sent to every resident so that they at least have the possibility to make the choice about whether to invest in backflow valves and how to maintain their sump pump systems, their code for new construction, they should be, in my opinion, in every home in this area because of our infrastructure system. So if it could be a priority of the council to promote that communication, I think that would go a long way in parallel to the things this gentleman was talking about. And as we're talking about communication, I'll just remind you that many residents really do miss the regular broadcast of these meetings on TV. I know almost no one uses TV for paid cable, but the the HD antenna systems used to broadcast this, and it was a really great thing for people to have. And not only was it great for people that didn't prefer to use YouTube or the computer and iPads, but there was a schedule that was pretty dependable for special meetings and things like that that would be easily tuned into. So if those two things could be considered, I think it would go a long way. Thanks for all that you do.
Thank you. Is anyone else interested in sharing with us this evening? Okay, seeing no one else move towards the podium, we will move on to our agenda, or not agenda, our lack of agenda, which is talking about goals. Who has a place to start? You want to start with the city manager? Do you want to start with a council member? Who's ready?
Well, I think if we go down memory lane as to how we got here, I want to say that maybe it was like the December 5th, or I think it was the December 5th meeting that this was originally on the agenda. We had a late night meeting, and then this got pushed back, and we discussed it again. And I think this is probably like the third time now. It was on the agenda twice for a meeting, and then now this is the fruit of recommendation to have a work session to more informally discuss. I want to say it was originally the current approved goals and objectives, but potentially maybe we start having the discussion for the next fiscal year as well.
Okay. So I think during that meeting, we also, several of us were hoping that we wouldn't start, our intent is not to start over. Our intent is to look at the goals that were already established and agreed upon, and then perhaps fine tune them in some ways. And then if we follow along to make the list broader and then also encompass, as you just said, the goal setting with the budget goals that we have coming forward. So in saying that, who has a place they'd like to start?
Well, I suppose I'll start since no one else wants to do it. But if we want to go through this, does anybody else want to go through this line by line and?
Well, I guess what I would ask is that if there's something that's, start with the priorities, and, because I don't think we necessarily need to go line by line. If there's something that you think is, needs to be removed, perhaps we could do that, but I would prefer that you focus on the key items that would be the, move closer to our goals.
Okay, let's take a look at goal 5 then, if you don't mind. Ensure a safe and comfortable environment for everyone. I would like to, and this is the exact same, or not close to the exact same sub goal that I talked about in previous meetings, where I would like to add, prepare a comprehensive and coordinated plan to address roads, sewers, and water mains within the city, such that all roads are at a fair or better level, aging sewer lines replaced, and water main breaks number 1 or less per calendar year by 2035. Coordinated, that word means that the plan should address water mains and sewer sections simultaneously when roads are repaired. Multiple funding sources and options should be presented to the council for consideration. And that's the goal, one of the sub-goals that I would like added to goal 5 here. Or something similar. If we want to massage the wording, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Well, you did give a specific time frame, right? 2035, which is 11 years out.
Yes.
So when you say address, there's many ways to interpret that. I mean, address could be start it, or it could be finish it, or it could be halfway done. We should probably define what address is, because I'm telling you, in 11 years, it won't all be done.
I agree with that to some extent. I like what you wrote, but I think that we need to make, so that 2035 is a long-term goal, we need to identify some short-term milestones between now and, this fiscal year, next fiscal year, or something like that. If you're like, do you get what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. To go back to the first comment, when I say address, I mean, here's the sentence again. The word coordinated means that the plan should address water mains and sewer sections simultaneously when roads are repaired. I'm just saying that I want a comprehensive and coordinated plan. So I want the plan to say, we're gonna go to do this section, and it's going to look at the sewer, the sewers and the water mains all at the same time. We already have a pretty good idea of what needs to be fixed. I just want the plan put out there, and so that we can all see it. As far as a short-term fix, I'm welcome to hear any wording that we could, I mean, to me, I want a plan this year.
There we go. That's what I'm looking for.
Yes, I
When
want
do
the
you want
plan this year.
What do you want? Yeah, I think everything you said makes sense, but the I want a plan needs a time frame. So when you say this year, like by the end of the fiscal year, by the end of the calendar year, by
Prepare a
budget time?
comprehensive and coordinated plan within calendar year 2024
I like it.
to address what roads, sewers, and water mains within the city, such that all roads are fair and so on.
I like it.
If I can offer some context too. So there was discussion about these goals and objectives, and we thought like, hey, I think Councilmember Shepherd brought it up that there's actually a lot of infrastructure already in our goals and objectives. And so I provided, with the help of Michelle, we provided you the highlighted ones that are more reflective of capital improvements in infrastructure. Two of the things that I would offer up for the council to consider is, and we can add it to the agenda if it's the pleasure of the consensus of everybody, is the establishment of an infrastructure committee and have two people on that. I've already started discussions with DPW, AEW, our engineer, and our finance director as far as how we are going to basically try to identifying is the easy part. It's funding it is the challenge. And so I think it would be beneficial if we were to identify some committee members and get those conversations started. The other thing that I brought up to staff yesterday was, instead of having a budget work session where it's kind of the dog and pony show of council hearing from department heads in a regular meeting, I was thinking more of having a sooner rather than later budget conversation where, the department heads and council members were seated across the table from each other, and the conversations, the concerns like Mr. Wolf has had are addressed, and hey, that is a point that we need to bake into this year's budget. And that is to address what he's saying specifically. We need to basically camp where exactly the problems lie. There are also some other engineering opportunities possibly in regards to some relief on that street. So, but those are things that I think could be beneficial in a budget discussion sooner rather than later, so that those talking points end up we document them and then we bake them in, and we can point out where those have been addressed in the budget as we move forward.
So I'm strongly opposed to establishing a committee, because I feel like you can't both say, I'm in charge of the operations of the city and making the plans for how the city's going to run, and I want to shift the responsibility to a committee. I think that, I think it's your responsibility to establish the plan, as Councilmember Binkowski outlined, and then present it to the entire council for discussion, because that's solely a city manager's responsibility. And establishing a committee, I think, is just shifting some of that responsibility where it doesn't belong.
Actually, I think it gives perspective, and I think would create greater buy-in. And either way, we'll do it ourselves if that's your pleasure. Or, we welcome the input of two council members participating in a committee fashion, which is authorized in the new charter.
I'm not completely supportive of a committee in this regard either. I would, if people, like I said, if people want to talk and do it and take the time, I'm all for it. But to me, this seems like a city management goal, and I don't think you're going to find too much difficulty in buy-in to fix these problems. We all know we need to fix them, and as people have said, it's been going on long enough. So.
And
Well,
But like I said, I'm not opposed to it. well, I'm not completely opposed to it. I'm not interested in serving on it. It's different to me with the ordinance committee.
that true?
To me, that was a legislative function to go through the ordinances of the city, and that's kind of a committee or a council job.
I could foresee you internally establishing a committee with AEW and the DPW and all the people that are employed by the city as the experts and the people have knowledge of how things work, and making your internal committee to establish, the plan to present to council. But no one on this committee or no one on this dais is knowledgeable about the engineering and how the DPW stuff works. I mean, that's the job of the employees of the city.
What time is it? Because I'm going to write,
Wait.
I'm going to write that down.
Would it be, hold on,
I'm gonna
though.
quote you,
Would it be
Councilmember.
it would be informational, right? The committee itself would serve to be informational. And I would assume, correct me if I'm wrong, those people that you just mentioned would be part of that committee.
Absolutely.
The DPW, the AEW, and it would be for conversation. And I know what your aversion is to the committees. I understand it. But I think
This is an important enough topic that we need the city to come up with all the information and present it to the entire council. As the gentleman spoke, this is a dire situation for the city. We need experts on it. And yes, I don't know anything about sewers. I'm not going to suggest it. I don't know how to fix roads. I don't know any of that. That's not my job. That is the city administration's job, and you can't lean on council members. You need experts. This is a big deal. You need AEW, you need whoever you
I'm very
consultants.
well aware of that. I'm just extending the opportunity to participate.
I think the benefit of a subcommittee would be this. He is responsible, and his staff and his people are responsible for developing the technical aspects of the plan. But before he can proceed with a worthwhile plan, he has to have some sense of the resources involved. And I think what he's saying is he'd like council involved in this to possibly say, okay, sorry, Mr. Raker, I think you're going too fast, too far. I think we can sell that, we can't sell that. So there is a technical side which completely belongs to his people, but there's a financial/political side that I think belongs to us.
That's everybody on this
prioritization.
dais' responsibility, though, not just two people off
I
in a
agree,
corner.
but those two would
That's what-
simply be kind of, again, informational advice, things like that.
That's everybody's responsibility, though, not just a couple members.
But it would be similar to what we're starting to do with the ordinances, which is have a conversation. When we finalize a topic with ordinances, it's coming back to city council, and city council still has the opportunity to weigh in on whatever version we bring before city council. To me, the value is you have some of the discussions ahead of time, you weed out some of the things ahead of time, and then it maybe is a shorter process for some of the heavy lifting, but council can't make a determination in a committee on their own. It's informational. If they can figure things out in a conversation and bring it to city council for even more conversation and, fine tune it even more, it's not a bad thing. It's sharing information, and information will be shared greater in those meetings than they perhaps can on a regular basis to get to the point, if that makes sense.
They shouldn't be shared greater because those meetings are broadcast to the public, and the public needs to see it's something like this. They need to understand every conversation that's had, every piece of information that's had needs to be in front of the public, not in committee workshops that aren't broadcast and people only get to see them if they happen to notice on the calendar that they're happening and taking time out of their day. This is a really important topic, and people need to understand every single nuance of it. And to Councilmember Minkowski's point, it's very different than the ordinance because that's a legislative issue. This is not a legislative issue. This is a city, it's
It's
an
very much a
administration
legislative issue. I mean, there's going to be potentially a ballot proposal coming out of
That
it.
piece of it is, but not the whole project.
But the
Not saying the whole,
prioritizing of projects, the understanding of where we're going to allocate resources or how to best allocate them, those are conversations, those are a lot of conversations, right? And the engineers and the DPW and administration are going to handle a lot of that, but to have council understand where we are, you're a civil engineer, you understand some of that
Previous
stuff
life,
moving
yeah.
in. I work for an engineering firm, I pretend I understand engineering things a little bit too, not that I ever want to live in that world, but whatever gives us the most information to make the best decisions we can make is what I want to do moving forward. And
All of
I
us
feel
need
this is a
information.
So
valid
it's just
thing.
is a question, so as far as the ordinance committee, is that shut to the public?
No, of course not.
Of course not. So the
But
fact
it's
is
not
that you have an
broadcast.
opportunity to get more transparency, to have other involvement from citizens that will probably make their time, because seriously, I mean, you made your time here for a workshop, right, for this. If this is on a standing, recurring basis, do you think you might be, this is rhetorical, right? There's probably other people who would want to chime in and see what the process is and feel more comfortable about where we're reaching our decision based on those committee meetings. I mean, this happens in Lansing, it happens at the federal government, right, where we have breakout sessions and we discuss what was potential for legislation by getting it out in the open. Now, whether or not we make those final determinations or not, that's up to us here, right? But at least it's being discussed.
Is the ordinance committee recorded?
Is it-
No. Is it broadcast? No.
Is it open to the public?
Is it recorded, though? Those are two separate issues. Can someone watch it at their leisure? Can someone who can't make it that day watch it at a different time?
Are there
No.
minutes for it?
No.
No minutes for it? Okay.
No.
But it's still open for the public, is it not?
For the people who happen to see that it's happening.
So do we want to make it a priority if we have subcommittees that we incur the cost to have them televised or taped, whatever? I mean, that's something we could do as well if it's really that important.
Well, to me, with the ordinance committee.
Discussion, I think.
Well, it
we're-
is, but-
To me, with the ordinance committee, we're generating suggestions for the city attorney, who is then going to prepare revised ordinances to bring in front of us, and that's all on the public record. And you know what? And I'll say this, you convinced me, I think a infrastructure committee would be fine. I'm not opposed to it. I suggest that, instead of arguing about it here, we just simply put it on the next city council agenda, and we vote on it then. And if three of us want it, then we'll form it. And if three of us don't, then we won't. So,
So-
instead of, talking it to death.
Well, it's
But
not
it should be
arguing
part of
on-
this goal, and that's what we're here for.
Right, I'm not here, that's exactly the other point, is I was hoping to say, yes, Matt, I like your new additional goal. Let's add it to the goals and then move on to maybe some other goals.
So,
Well, it-
I'm sorry to interrupt,
okay.
but did you put within, at the end of the calendar year on that
Yes,
goal?
I did.
So I think
And I can
that's a-
share this with
Yep,
whoever.
I think it's a great goal, and I think it should be included.
And this is a workshop, and it is informal, and every conversation is valid. And if our conversation gets us to a place where we can work together and move forward, that's what we're here for. So let's not quash conversation.
Okay,
Yes, Mr. Baker?
I'm just trying to work within the, timeframe, so.
Mr. Raker?
I don't think that we're going to be able to have that plan before the budget. And the budget is, the end of the fiscal year is June 30th, and I don't foresee that necessarily. We have the budget itself to get through, the CIP. We are already tracking to address this problem in advance of August, because that's when if we have to have language on a ballot, it has to go to the state before August, or sometime in August. So
So are you suggesting you'll have a plan ready before August?
I believe so, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's within the next year?
Yeah, it said calendar year 2024, so that's.
That's
so-
December of
That works.
2024.
Calendar year works.
There we go.
That's what he
I know,
said.
Mr. Raker, on several occasions, we discussed a potential millage or bond, whatever, and you'd always mention that you wanted to put it on the November ballot. So thus, you'd have to have a plan prepared and approved, again, before August. So it's within our window.
I didn't hear calendar year part.
Yep, sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay, my only caveat, so now that becomes actually a budget, a goal for the next fiscal year's goals and objectives, which I'm okay with. We're just saying, hey, have this done in the next fiscal year by the end of the current calendar year, which I'm okay with. But I mean, it no longer is applicable to this year's goals and objectives, is my point.
I mean, all I'm looking for is the plan, you know, on our desk this year sometime so we can move on it, so.
So then, would we agree then that would be a goal for next year? I mean, because I'm trying to like keep this.
Well, I mean,
We put together a process, we put together goals, and you guys are eventually evaluate me on them, and I'm just trying to keep it synchronized.
So,
I would like to amend these goals at the next city council meeting for the rest of 2024.
I would agree that if we're here just to discuss these, then it goes back to the whole, you know, we can't evaluate you on these because we were told that these were city goals. For example, you know, the point that I made before about, you know, the DDA brought in those businesses, you didn't. So if we're looking to.
It's
if
part
we're-
and parcel of the goals and objectives that were approved by this body.
I understand that I wasn't here then. So if we're just going to look at the 23, 24 goals and objectives that were approved, then, you know, I have, aside from amending it, I think with Councilmember Binkowski's suggestion, we could do that at the next meeting. I have nothing else to say because I would not agree with, this is not anything that we can measure you against because half the things are the city as a whole, not as you. So I don't agree with these goals and objectives. If you're going to say, okay, they were put in place, they voted on them, they stand, then that's fine, they stand. I don't have anything I can do with that, aside from amending it as he,
But what are we amending?
I think we should amend the 2023-24 goals and objectives to include the objective that he just mentioned. I don't know if he has any other, but then at some point, we're going to need to set the goals and objectives for 24, 25, and that's a whole separate discussion than what you're saying. So,
Which, I'm just pointing out again, what he's suggesting to amend for this year is actually applicable to next year.
Which could be just then carried over to next year's goals.
Right.
We wouldn't have to start a 24, we wouldn't have to start another goal list, right? Isn't that where we are? Many of us are fine with maintaining the existing goals and tweaking them. That's what we discussed last time. That's why we're having this workshop, to see where everyone stands on that. When there would be nothing wrong with having something on this list this year and then moving it to the next year as well. Right?
agreed.
If we're discussing new goals, and these goals here are the 2023-24 fiscal year goals. So these goals end June 30th, yes? Is that my understanding?
That's what he's asserting, yes.
They are applicable to the budget in my evaluation period, yes.
Right, so, and he's going to use these goals, well, see, this is what I don't quite understand, is Mr. Raker is going to plan a budget for the 2024-25 fiscal year.
We are going to
That-
plan a budget.
Yes, no, well, he's gonna plan the budget and we're going to approve it. And that fiscal year starts July 1. So I say, I would like to set goals that would apply to that coming fiscal year. So when he's planning that budget, he can use these goals to guide his spending priorities. That's the whole point of these. So I suppose you could say that these are the 2024-25 goals that correspond with the 2024-25 fiscal year.
I think that's smart.
Which is why he said he wanted to have a conversation.
We're saying the same thing.
Okay, we're all saying the same thing.
regarding
I'm just
budgets
trying
At the very
to.
beginning, that's what he led with, so I think we're on the same page, which
Okay.
is great.
Okay, I'm just,
Does that look good?
So then we're throwing these out and coming up with the new
Yes,
goals.
this is-
All right,
yeah.
excellent, let's do that. I think that's a great
Well,
idea.
we doing that?
Throw them out.
No,
General.
we're not throwing anything out.
We're keeping these, we're adding, all right, my viewpoint.
I'm just saying,
Glenn, you've been really quiet.
Okay, so we establish these for this year, right? If we're gonna go through and establish what we're gonna do for next year, that's fine, right? And if there's something that we need to add, like we just discussed, that's okay. But we're not gonna just throw this out and start over, right? We're gonna talk about what we need for 2025 budget. That's fine.
So when you guys established these, I remember the meeting, because I watched it online, you guys all wrote your priorities, and from there you distilled this. So why should the new council be bound by your priorities from last year?
Because it's still applicable for this year.
No, we're making the 24-25 goals for the budget. We're making new. So I don't think that they're necessarily applicable. You have a new group of people.
But we weren't here tonight to do 24, 25.
No,
We're here
this is-
tonight to revise this with the concerns, the immediate concerns having to do with infrastructure. And then when we have the pre-budget meetings, then that's time we start thinking about the upcoming
That's not my
goals and
understanding.
objectives.
My
Does that
understanding
make
is we're
sense?
here to create the 2024-25.
No,
No,
sir.
not at
Goals.
all.
No,
I mean,
sir.
that's not what I understood at all.
So this,
Do you understand that?
this whole thing came about, if you remember, when this came up,
Yes, for this one.
it was Councilmember Offit's like, this has nothing to do with you, as the DDA did this. And I'm like, well, and then we kind of diverged from there, and you guys wanted to take these and redo them for this current year. And I have been trying to make it clear, like, if we stay the course here and we start looking at next year, however, the conversation, the consensus was that there was an interest in infrastructure. So we identified what is infrastructure like here. We thought about rearranging the furniture on the goals here within this piece of paper, if necessary. I'm not sure it is. But then the conversation evolved just now into what Mr. Binkowski would like, which we're all in agreement with. But that due date is now into the next fiscal year. So that's my point. If we're trying to do things in some type of succession of we're establishing goals, we have an evaluation process, and we have a budget, I'm just trying to keep, the same things in the same chronological
So
order.
the way I recall, the way we left it, we're gonna pull out the infrastructure, right, set it aside. That's what this document is. That's why thought we were here tonight. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
this one, right. But, if we need to have the other conversation, that was not what I was under the assumption that we were doing tonight. Now, we can have that discussion, but it may take a much longer time, and I don't know if it's necessarily, prudent to do that if we're working off of what will be coming up with the budget for next year, right? So,
If I may, so last year, around the beginning of February, I sent to council members a proposed schedule to execute the budget. It started in February. We weren't exactly the most congenial at the time, and it didn't really get, the budget was approved, and I think that the goals and objectives actually were finally approved like after the budget. I think we finally got those locked in place. But we're starting this much earlier, and we're actually doing it in a fashion that makes greater sense, where we're having the conversation about what are you hearing from your constituents, what are we hearing from residents, and you and department head leadership will have a conversation so that we can say, hey, yeah, these issues of flooding in Elmsford, we need to bake this into the budget, and here's how we need to do this. This is what we're anticipating the cost is, and that way we're closing the communication loop. We're hearing what the constituents have to say, we're taking action on it as a body, and the administration puts the plan together.
yeah, I agree that we need to have those discussions with those department heads in order to make sure that we are aligned with what we envision as far as our goals, that they're also on the same page.
And prioritizing, right? It gives us the capacity to prioritize based on the most immediate needs, because we might think we know them, but if we don't have those conversations, we may be off base.
So to facilitate further conversation on this, when would your availability be to have a conversation with this budget primer with the department heads? That would be really kind of the next big first step, and we're doing it sooner, much sooner, rather than later than we did last year. And from that, we can probably start eaching out goals and objectives that make sense. Like, hey, Elmsford, we need to crack the code this year on Elmsford. We're throwing $500,000 at it. This is what we need to do, X, Y, and Z. These are the line items where this is coming from.
Do they have a calendar that is readily available for each department head and when they can meet?
I mean, they were amicable to doing this. It made a lot more sense than to come before council and plead your case as far as like, this is what I need. That way they can have the honest conversation with you too, like, hey, this is what we need to get this done.
Yeah.
Sooner up front instead of at the end of the
So
conversation.
set up some dates and send us a few dates and we'll,
Well, I'd like to know when we could, what's the drop dead date, right? When do we, sooner rather than later?
Right.
Sooner rather than
right?
later, sure.
So, I mean, I don't want to say by the end of February, because that
Oh,
may
yeah, I
not.
want to get this going well before that.
Okay.
I mean, absolutely, and I think the department heads too. I mean, keep in mind, we're going to have, our tempo is going to pick up as far as, you know, you have the ordinance committee meeting, maybe we'll have an infrastructure meeting, we're having these meetings, but, it's, you know, if everyone's amicable to it, it's a pretty logical way forward. And I think from those conversations, we can probably identify more goals and objectives that are reasonable and probably should be in the next budget.
So first
In the next-
discussion with DPW.
Well, it'll be with all the department heads.
Sure.
And I told them, I said, you know, they're going to be, collectively, I need you to reflect on your interactions with what you're hearing, also what I'm hearing, what DPW knows they need to address. And we're probably going to land on a lot of the same issues. But what we're getting to is we're addressing the needs of the community. We're having the conversation up front before the budget is even, starting to be put together, pardon me. And I can have that conversation with department heads still this week, and then start, getting what your availabilities are in the next, throughout the month of February. And so then it kind of goes in tandem. If we leave these in place, and this will get revised, I mean, for the following year, we could, if there's a need to rearrange these, so be it, we can do that. I'm not sure if that's going to provide any value, but I think having this conversation and pushing a change in an approach has added value.
I'd like to make sure that, I didn't want to get rid of all of these, whether I liked them in the beginning or not, they're there, and they have a timeline. I'd like us to see that through, but I would also like, if anyone has any concerns, such as Councilmember Binkowski's adding comprehensive plan to the page. If anyone else has anything else they'd like added in, let's add it in now, so that no one feels like they didn't have any kind of impact on this, or something critical is getting missed between now and the time we address the 24-25 budget goals.
My whole purpose here, the whole purpose that I brought up, when I first sat down here, is I wanted to set goals before the budget process started. And I think that's still a good idea, and I thought that's why we were here today. That's why we had the urgency. That's why we were doing this in January. You're setting the goals now before the budget process for the next fiscal year starts. And if we're not going to do that, then I don't know what the purpose is.
Well, I think.
And this is why I wanted a facilitator too. I wanted someone to come through and see things from a, neutral perspective. But to me, our job is to set the goals. Mr. Raker's job is to figure out how to fund them or tell us he can't possibly do it. And then our job is to approve the budget.
And
So if we don't do the goals now, before the budgeting process, then what are we doing?
Well, what are you going to base your goals on? If we were
We're gonna base the
if we were
goals
to
on what we
find
think need to be
goals
done.
tonight- Yeah, but you think needs to be done. Would you not rather have a conversation with the department heads and the people who are involved on a day-to-day basis to figure out what the view is from their standpoint, what the realities are that they're dealing with, instead of just coming up with a set of goals that may or may not meet the needs of our community may or may not be enforceable or actionable, I think his plan is good. It just delays us a little bit. It's giving us information. The most important thing we can do is have information for the things that we do here. And you have great ideas. Your input here was great. It's something we know we needed. I think we all thought it was there in a different way, perhaps, but it was concise and it was good. And I take a little bit of, we don't need a facilitator to have a conversation. Let's have conversations because we're grown-ups and we all want the same thing. We all want our residents to not have to come before us for 18 times to say, what's going on with my water? I hate when I get information from people and I have nothing to give to them because I don't know, because there's no answer, right? We all want to be able to respond to people. So let's make the goals based on something we can actually effectively change and something we can work for that'll be good for everybody.
I think that I agree with Mr. Binkowski. We have some fundamental responsibility to establish a set of goals from the council based on the input that we've gotten from the community. We know clearly infrastructure and roads is number one. Communications is also a very important one, number two. That's not to say that once we meet with the departments, we can't add additional ones or tweak them, but we have a responsibility to set goals that are important to council based on the input that we've gotten from the community. I think that's what you're saying, aren't you, Mr. Binkowski?
Yes.
Okay. How about this? We have a set of goals that was laid out, okay, at great length by some members of the previous council. Goals will change over time. Councils will change over time. This process should be evolutionary, not revolutionary. I've worked for the same company for 32 years. I've been evaluated my performance has been evaluated 32 times. And I can tell you, I've probably 10, 12 processes have been used. It seems like every other year we've got to come up with here's the new way we're going to evaluate you. And then 2 years later, here's a new way we're going to evaluate. And it's almost like there's no context or relevance. So it almost throws the concept of evaluation out the window because there's no context. I'd like us to avoid that. I think what was laid out here was done at great pains with a council member who had human resources experience. I do not have human resources experience. Thus, I told him to his face, I will defer to you and just look at what you've done. He laid it out. I looked at it. Seemed pretty good. We approved it. That was the last council. Now, as a new council, we can change things. I'm proposing that we take, first of all these goals are good. One can disagree with who gets the credit for executing them, such as the downtown business. Was it Mr. Raker and his staff, or was it DDA? We can argue that later. But the general goals, I think, are sound. And I think, as Mr. Binkowski already brought forth, we want to add another goal, and I think that's good and important. And I think essentially we're in the process of verbalizing and doing that. If some of these goals need to be removed, we can probably talk about that. Or if you have other additional goals, we can do that. My point is, I think we're kind of beating this up pretty hard. When we're right here, we've got some time to sit down. We've talked about infrastructure. We're all in agreement. Are there any other goals you would like to add to this document?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Rager.
I would refer you to the policy that was adopted for these goals and objectives, and it has a requirement that I am in agreement with it as well. And so, I mean, we are changing this midstream, and I don't think your advocacy, Councilmember Binkowski, has been heard loud and clear. That's why we are doing what we are doing. But I don't think rearranging the furniture on this year's goals and objectives is going to add a whole lot of value. I do think having conversation in regards to what you've already suggested is fantastic, and I think it needs to be. It'll be on the next. It's going to be on the next fiscal year's goals and objectives. It makes perfect sense.
I am not attempting to fix last year's goals, the 2023-24 budget, or 2023-24 fiscal year goals. I'm trying to set the 2024-25 fiscal year goals. And that's what I want to do. And maybe if other people want to do that, we can do that right now. I can go through here and give you, and we can take this as a template, and we can add and delete. I've added one, or I've already suggested we add one already. If we want to stop and go home,
No.
we can do that too.
This is, I think, I'm finding that we're almost saying the same thing, but we got to say it a couple times till we both get on the same page. So we're basically wanting to work on it, because this started because you guys were critical of this current year's goals and objectives. And so that you want to change them. If we're not going to change them, then fine, we can move forward and talk about the 24-25 goals. I'm wholeheartedly in agreement with you.
That's what I want to do.
That's what he said multiple
wasn't what
times.
you
That's
that's not what this started out
That's
as.
fine, okay, we didn't start off at that. We came to the agreement that we're not going to change the 2023, 24 goals as part of this conversation. Do we all agree that we all understand we're not going to change these? Is that what everyone's in agreement with? Everyone's happy with that? There. The next issue at hand is, because having reviewed these, some of us new people have identified some really critical things that we think need to be brought to the forefront and be at the top of everyone's mind as we go into the 24-25 budget year. We would like to establish these goals. One of the first ones would be what Councilmember Binkowski mentioned about establishing a plan. Is everyone comfortable with that being part of the new goals we're going to do for 24-25? Excellent. What are the goals did you think would be good to add to that?
One second, though, because Councilmember Shepherd was trying to interject.
No, just saying, as far as if we, setting a plan, I guess setting a plan's a goal, but, again, we have an opportunity, we've already discussed that we think it's critical that we discuss what our objectives are with the department heads. So I'd really like to make sure that gets started, and then once we get their input, that'll help us understand that, yes, we bring something to the table that we think is a priority. I think we can all agree on some of these priorities, but as far as what those actual goals should be, we need to have the input of those department heads so that we clearly understand. What is it? Is there something that is that is a roadblock in order to achieve those goals? Right? Just setting a goal without those types of inputs I don't think is going to be of value until we get those inputs and have the discussion. Because perhaps we bring something to the table that hadn't been discussed or considered by those department heads as what our objectives and goals are.
Why
So
can't we do
that's
both?
critical.
Why can't we do both? Why can't we set some goals that are important to us and then talk to them too?
When we say set goals, we're not going to vote anything here. So in essence, any goal we're laying out in this workshop is simply a proposal for Mr. Rager to investigate. Are we agreed?
It can be put on the agenda for discussion.
My hope was that,
It's not going to go on the agenda for discussion just yet. I mean, we got a whole budget process to go through, but I want to hear them, absolutely, and we will vet them accordingly and put them together as a, I don't want us to start taking piecemeal of the budget process and putting it as part of a regular council meeting at this point.
Well, agreed, Mr. Rager, but I think it is fair since the council does kind of set policy. I think it's okay to at least verbalize some goals.
Oh, 100%,
And then
that's what
over
I'm saying.
time, you can look and see whether they're realistic goals or not, or whether they're doable. So, and again, here it's a workshop, nothing's going to be voted on, but let's go ahead and lay it on the table. I see the goals, I agree with the infrastructure goal. I'm open to, at this point, let's talk about additional goals that maybe we should talk about. We're just talking here.
I think there's a lot of things that we could do as far as goals to really bolster up number 6, encourage environmentally sustainable practices.
Okay.
We've heard about incentive programs, from the county, but I think that the city could make its own incentive program for residents and businesses to reduce the impervious surfaces on their property, thus reducing loads on the sewer system. Doesn't have to be a big incentive, $100, $200, but I was hoping that the city management could prepare a proposal for us to provide an incentive program. So we can actually take the things that Clausen naturally has identified and start putting them into practice and start getting them out to the community. Instead of people building giant concrete driveways in homes when it's time to put in a new driveway.
They can't do that right now because we have, the ordinance has been passed, so they can't, they're limited to what they can do.
A certain
Well,
percentage.
let's look at that as well. And let's look at some of these ways that we can keep the water out of the sewers. If we keep the waters out of the sewers, we keep the water out of the basements. So that is one. That is, or another one of the goals that I think is absolutely achievable and something that is, I don't know, frankly, low-hanging fruit.
I mean, I agree with the concept, yes, that encouraging people not to put a bunch of impermeable surfaces on their property is good. Question is, we talk about incentives, we're talking spending, and the question is, how much money does it take to drive the incentive? Again, it's a worthy goal. The question is maybe how feasible is it? I mean, I'm open to the investigation. Mr. Raker, what's your thoughts?
I actually had a conversation with Councilmember Shepherd and also with Nick Stepnitz about the need to bring a greater sustainability green component to the goals and objectives. So
Well,
we're
that
in
can be
line.
done through communication, right? We're going to increase our communication, you're going to add someone to take care of that, something that wouldn't necessarily cost a lot of money, but just educating residents about what they can do personally
Yeah.
with their own
An
space.
incentive, we can explore that, but I mean, the aspect or the spirit of having a greater green and sustainable presence within the goals and objectives.
We also kind of threw out there a potential disincentive to reduce the green infrastructure.
Right, and tree canopy,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah, so, all right, so Mr. Raker can look into that.
As far as other environmentally sustainable practices, I think that we, as the city council, have a duty to see if we can reduce energy usage by the city. And I would suggest that we make it a goal to reduce city energy usage by 5% for the next calendar year. To me, that's another thing we could do that would obviously reduce the costs that the city spends and as well as help protect the environment. I've read an article today about how FEMA is providing grants for solar panel installation. I would like to research, that kind of thing. That could reduce the energy that we consume from DTE, reduce the amount of money we send to DTE, and generate some of our power ourselves. I have thoughts for providing high-speed vehicle charging stations in the parking lots. Ferndale has them. To me, they're a draw. They're always filled with cars. People pay for them, so it's not like it's a freebie giveaway. This could be a way for the city to generate revenue. As the gentleman here said, we should investigate the hiring of a grant writer on a part-time basis to get us some of these grants. And that position would probably pay for itself. And to me, that should be a goal.
Okay. Can I take a moment? That's been kicked around a bit, and I find it interesting because, yes, more grants is better. In my uneducated sense, I guess you write more grants, you got a better chance of getting grants. But is that really true? I guess that whole process, I'm not fully in, but Mr. Raker, would you like the assistance of a grant writer, or do you think the person would be of no use or counterproductive to you?
I think we could look into it, but from my experience here, I mean, these grants are coming out of our state and federal rep and senators' offices. And we've answered the call on them, and it's just a matter of whether or not we've gotten picked. I mean, we had the one big disappointment with State Rep.
Chair
McDaniels, Chair McDaniels, who I think that was who he was referring to, but I think he was absolutely incorrect when he said no one was responding, because I put a certain council member directly in touch with her. So I don't think that was accurate on his part. But we're answering those calls. I mean, a lot of them, we can give it a try. I mean, a lot of them do align with a green initiative. So, I mean, we can look farther into it.
So, but if you, to return to my question, do you feel a grant writer would be of help to you, whether part-time, whether free? I'll give you an example.
It would to be determined.
People-
I don't know.
Let's put it bluntly. People sometimes come forward and they offer their services, and they may offer it at low cost or free. And sometimes that individual, although well-intentioned, can actually make a process worse because maybe they're not skilled in that area. Again, I'm just asking the question. This isn't my gig. All I know is what I read. But I know when you're applying for things, the person who's being applied to doesn't want to be dealing with somebody who's amateurish, shall we say? I'm just asking the question.
I think, well, I mean, you're dealing with staff members that are oftentimes, I mean, they're not, they're professional, but they're human, and they're not complicated to write. I mean, they're very succinct and to the point. You know, we didn't get that grant because there was a lot of other policy and political capital that was already expended in Troy to garner what they received. And so, and that was explained by the state rep to us, I think, actually at a council meeting.
McConnell, yeah.
So, I mean, I don't see these as difficult for us to write. I mean, we were successful in getting it. Two?
Yeah,
So-
too.
I think the advantage of having someone with expertise in grant writing is someone who knows the full breadth of what's available and has experience in the tips and tricks and how to get it. You know, I think I think that it's worth investigating, finding out what's out there and what they can offer. I mean, to see if there is someone who says, well, I know of, X, Y, Z things that we don't know about or other avenues for getting grants. I think it's a worthwhile pursuit personally, because what the heck, right? I mean, we need help. We need more money. We have all these projects that we keep saying we don't have money for. So why not leave every stone unturned and find someone with some more expertise than any of us have?
I would agree, more expertise might be good, but when a person offers their services for free, it doesn't suggest they got a really
I
good
didn't
background.
say someone for free. I say it's worth
Well,
investigating.
we've seen some.
I know, but it's worth investigating to find out if it's something worthwhile. Let's go out and talk to some grant writers and see what the advantage of, having a grant, what do they bring to the table, above what, Nick Stechniks can do and what the current staff can do. And if we do a thorough investigation and there's nothing to bring to it, then, but we're just, we're guessing right here. We don't know what's involved, and I think it's worth investigating.
Under section 2, fostering an informed, and I know I'm jumping all around here, but fostering an engaged and informed community, I think one of the best ways to do this is through the city's website. And frankly, I think our city's website needs some real help, if not a complete overhaul. I've just had a constituent 2 days ago said to me that they couldn't find some information on the city website. Every time there's a holiday on Monday,
I know what you're going to say.
there should be a banner on our website saying
Garbage collection.
garbage collection is delayed or it isn't delayed. Because you'll find that half of the people on the Facebook forums have no idea. And I understand maybe people just aren't taking the time. It's easier to type it into Facebook. But really, it should be, this should be a banner headline every time. Just because. That's how we help out our citizens and that's how we help our communication. And I think, especially since the council last year raised the millage specifically for communication, we should take the time to fix our main communication avenue, which I think is the city website. Maybe other people get their information somewhere else. But when I want information about the city, that's where I go first.
No, you keep talking, you're saying all the right things.
I had some, and I had a lot of comments on the previous goals. Notes that I took. For instance, number 1, deepen sense of place and community identity. One of the sub-goals is expand housing options. I have no idea what that means. To me, expand housing options, I mean, it could mean 100 different things to 100 different people. So to me, I would like to take goals like that and either get rid of them or make them a little more
Quantitative.
exact, coherent, whatever word you want to use. There's certain things that should be deleted because they've been achieved. Update city park signage. Well, apparently it's been done. So let's get rid of the goal for next year because we don't need it on the list anymore. And I could go on. Increase positive media coverage, which is under foster and engage and inform community. I don't, again, increase from what to what? Positive, how do we decide what's positive? And it's just things like that. I just think, well, we're just wasting our time. But I understand the thought behind it. It's like, yeah, everybody loves positive media coverage, but is this really a goal that is measurable?
Councilmember Mikowski, I hear what you're saying. As an engineer, I'm used to metrics and measuring. But even with that background, I have to acknowledge some things can't be boiled down to a number or a metric. Some things are more about a general feeling or impression that happens. What is good leadership? Well, you can put bullet items, but really, in many cases, it's how you feel about the person leading you. How much do I love you? Well, let me give you a 1 to 10. Please give me a number. Nobody relates to work. Some things just don't quantify well. So some of
I'm
these.
glad that's not a goal, though.
Well, it's the quantifiable goals from a human resources perspective that keep you out of court, right? Because you can't have it be subjective. So if you're going to measure someone's performance, it needs to be measurable. Otherwise, it's nonsense. You need something tangible because what you think is positive, what you think is positive might not be what you think is positive, might not what I think is positive. And that's why anything that is open to subjectivity does not belong on a goal that you're going to measure someone's performance against.
Well, I think, let's go to the example of expand housing options. He cited 8 building permits issued for new homes, 3 projects approved for, I think, the apartments, right? Multifamily. Now, I guess we could sit there and go, well, Mr. Raker, that's pretty good. But next year,
Well,
I
what
want
is
to
it
see
expanded
10.
from?
My point, I want to see 10, and I'd like to see 4 apartments. I mean, we can put numbers down on here, but they may not be achievable year to year.
Agreed.
what I'm
That's
getting
why you
at. So-
should only have goals that are reasonable, that can be measured and achievable.
But again, some things are given to an up and down nature. For example, this is expand housing options. I agree, it's kind of a generalist phrase. Then when Mr. Raker is giving you numbers to support the fact that, you know what, I did expand. Now, I could sit here and say, Mr. Raker, you got 8, you should have had 12. I think you failed. Or I could say, you got 3, you should have had 5. The fact is, it's going to go up and down every year, so we can't do a year-to-year measurable. It's almost like the objective is a little bit squishy, and it's his job to bring to us hard facts, hard numbers that support how he did that. He can't, for example, say, okay, expand housing. I had a bunch of people tell me they want to move to Clawson, and I think that means I've expanded our house. No, that's too general. He gave us hard numbers, but those numbers can't necessarily use a metric because First of all, there could be several metrics here, and number two, it's going to vary year to year. I think it's council's job here to look and say, all right, Mr. Raker, was 8 good enough and 3 good enough? Some might say yes, some might say no, Mr. Raker, get out there and do better. And again, this is where the evaluation process leads to either you continue his employment or is not. Let's face it, you've got termination with cause and termination without cause. If you terminate without cause, you didn't give any reasons why you fired him, right? I mean, that's how the political process is so subjective in evaluating these people.
Council member, if the operative word in that sentence was expand, how do those numbers support the success or failure of the word expand?
That's for us to decide.
No, it's not.
Yeah, we're the ones evaluating him.
I'm
We
saying-
are the ones that are doing the evaluation.
My thought is we should provide that quantification before we give the goals and not after.
I don't know that that's true.
Well-
In a purely technical, and again, I live in a pretty technical world. In a purely technical world, yes, you can have steps and numbers and that. But in the real world, there's pluses, there's ups and downs. Some years will be good, some years will be bad. And honestly, when you say, like, for example, 8 new home permits, okay, seems good. But then, of course, I can come back and say, well, it should be 10, or it should be this. The numbers, how shall I say this? I'm struggling to find the right way to say this. In essence, we like numbers that we can measure, but his job, that whole goal, the expand housing option, is so broad, there's many ways to accomplish it. And it may not just be give him a number. In other words, he's come 8, okay, he had 8. The question is, does this council think 8 is good enough? If he had 0, we'd probably have a problem. If he had 20, we'd all think he's wonderful. 8 is somewhere in the middle, and it's us as a council to evaluate, was that good or not? I mean, goals, let's face it, the goals have to be reasonable. You can't just pull numbers out of the air and say, you will meet this. I used to work for a guy like that, and he drove me crazy. Because here's my goals. I would look at him and say, that one's really not reasonable, and that one's not reasonable either. I would tell him right to his face. And Mr. Raker, I would hope, as a dutiful person reporting to the council, you would look us in the face and say, you know, council member such and such, I respect the goal you set for me, but I don't think it's reasonable for reasons A, B, C. So again, I'm a technical guy. I love hard metrics, but very few things in life break down to that simple.
The point is, you guys wrote the goal, expand, whatever, without defining what expand is. If you had said achieve, period, then 8's a reasonable answer to that. But the question is, will you expand housing? And a number not measured against anything else does not satisfy the criteria of expanding. So you guys set them up for failure.
So I think that question could have been answered in many ways, and many of the answers could have been non-quantifiable, in that our efforts in the past year have been, we saw these many proposals, we and responded to blah, 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 we had increase here, we had whatever, like, it's
That could have been
not clearly defined, but that leaves the opportunity for conversation and if we recall, this was Mr. Raker's first year. It was a very interesting, tough time when the goals were set. Setting goals in and of themselves were great, and goals are a place for conversation, and we can build on them. Some will have more impact than others. I would hope that all of these goals don't have the same amount of impact when it comes to someone's performance, and I would hope that many of them would tie together and create even hopefully a stronger sense of performance. That's in a conversation. Well, these things don't need to have a tick list with them that say plus, minus, whatever. Like, it doesn't have to have that, right? It depends on how we as a council would respond to reviewing them. And I think that was the approach we took at that time. I think that council did really well to get items on a list and pass it along. And clearly not a perfect list. I think all of us would say this is not a perfect list. But several of us will say, it's the list we have today. We're going to carry through the end of the 23-24 budget cycle. It can be used, will be used for review. And of course, we want to move on 24, 25 differently. Those of us who were here during this list have probably learned a lot about what our expectations are. And those who are new and want to impart wisdom on what we should be looking for 24, 25, valid, right? But we also shouldn't be giving him what has been done in the past, which is a list of every little tiny minutia thing that someone may want accomplished over the course of a year. I don't think that's helpful. I think a little bit broad is often good because it allows us to see what kind of a leader he is and what he can do with the team. And that's what we're employing city manager for.
So this was our start, right? And I think it was brought up before, we're trying to be, this is an evolution, not a revolution, as far as what this is. So as we move forward, this is a starting point. We can flesh this out. But the other thing we need to keep in mind, we just can't wholesale change it for year to year to year, because then that doesn't, as you pointed out, as far as evaluations that change that don't have any merit because they've changed, right? That we continue to evolve on what these are. We can put some more meat into whatever the objectives are, whatever those goals are. But this is a framework to start from, and let's build upon that.
Are you done with your list?
If it doesn't look like we're
We're not.
gonna revise anything, then, I've got nothing more tonight.
But nonetheless, you've got goals that you would like achieved. Am I correct? Whether we dump it in this format or not. So let's bring them to the table. We've got time. It's a workshop. It's informal. You brought a few that.
No, I think I've delivered a few that I wanted to deliver tonight,
enough.
so.
Councilmember Moffitt, did you have any you wanted to do?
I'm done.
No, come on, you had something.
I'm done.
Okay.
So is
Sounds like she's
your
done.
concern the content or the format?
Councilmember Anderson, I'm done.
Okay. Fair enough.
Okay. Is anyone else not done? My grandmother would kill me for saying that sentence, just for the record. She's not here, though. City Manager, Mr. Raker.
So I will solicit you for your availability for budget conversations with department heads. We'll set that up. And then it sounds like there is an interest to establish an infrastructure committee. So I will have that on the agenda for consideration for next Tuesday.
Okay. Anyone else? Any comments or anything? Okay, well, we did accomplish a couple things, so thanks everyone for coming out tonight. We'll see you back on Tuesday for our regularly scheduled city council meeting. Informal meeting closed. Oh, the robot thing is in here.
All right.